Well, the vampire squid's little brother, or is it twin brother? You know, Goldman Sachs and JPMorgan. This one's about JPMorgan. Someone sent this to me actually through my contact. Or actually, they just emailed me. I guess I've already talked to them before. Interesting, story coming from my favorite bank. Believe me, it's my favorite bank, JPMorgan. And all I can think of is, later this year, huh? Later this year, they're talking about this might, not even might. This is like they're saying it like this is going to happen. A deposit drain from banks. Why on earth would this happen? They even talk about because the Fed did QE, it's part of the problem. I'm reading this article. Are you telling me that JP Morgan is kind of, at the very least, kind of, and at the very best, absolutely, throwing the Fed under the bus to some extent? What? JP Morgan is telling the banks to basically merge, partner up because of this deposit run. I don't think they want to use that word, so they use deposit drain is looming. Let's not call it a run on bank deposits. That's your money and mine. The crunch may be felt this December as the Fed's policy reverses. Mid-sized bank deals already underway in quest for deposits. Already on their quest for deposits. Well, how do you have a bunch of depositors, you and me, when you and me are in debt up to our eyeballs, again, the general public, and we have 8-year car loans now, which they should be 3, 4, 5-year, honestly. Remember, 3 to 4 years was a let's get a 3-year loan. Those days are freaking over. 3 years, nobody does that. Are you crazy? 5-year minimum. Oh, yeah, but that puts me at $412 a month. I'm trying to look to spend about $375. Oh, well, that's okay. That's okay. We can put you in a 72-month loan, sir. I'm going to put you right where you need to be. Oh, so 5 years becomes 6 years, becomes 7 years, becomes 8 years. Right. And again, even though the interest rates are low, especially on cars, auto loans, they're collecting whatever interest rate it is for an additional 2 to 3 years, above 5, right? 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So if they're on this rampant, quest for deposits, again, my analogy I love to use, draining, trying to squeeze blood from a turnip. The turnip has been squeezed, double squeezed, triple squeezed, and then ran through Jason Ipfor's powerful Omega juicer, corkscrew style, and they still can't get a drop of blood out of it. So JP Morgan's saying, big bank, take little bank. Big bank, take medium bank. We're in desperate need of deposits, all of us. So let's work together, let's merge, and let's partner. And, that's what I'm reading here, I think. JP Morgan has some advice for regional banks. A deposit drain is coming. So merge while you can. Is that JP Morgan's fair warning that, hey, you saw what we did when those other, Looming and all that, Bear Stearns, we pick up and clean the corpse. Something that was worth, 80, 90, 100 something dollars a share, we paid $2. We tried to pay $1 for, but they were going to sue us. So we gave them $2 a share. And then they own that carcass, rebuild it, and take all the wealth that it generated before. Now it's going to generate for them. So is this JP Morgan's way of saying, listen, all you mid-size and small banks, you're going to merge with us, and we're going to get you for pennies on the dollar when this happens. So we're urging you now to try to work something out, merge together now before we scoop down and get you. Or is JP Morgan saying, medium banks, size banks, and small banks, medium banks, you need to merge with each other and with smaller banks, scoop them all up, so that we can then scoop you up a little bit later. Hint, hint. We don't want to have to scoop you up and then scoop up the small banks all at the same time. You guys need to merge now so we can get you for pennies on the dollar in a little short while coming in the near future. Is that what they're saying? The company's investment bankers are warning depository clients that they may begin feeling the crunch as early as this coming December. And this is apparently a byproduct of something the Federal Reserve has done. And that was when the Federal Reserve propped up the economy after the financial crisis. This is a byproduct now. You guys are going to have to merge. There's going to be a major deposit problem, as they like to call it. Deposit drain will be looming. Why would that be looming all of a sudden? Just because of QE, right? Why? JPMorgan argues that some mid-sized U.S. banks, considered anyone that has $50 billion in assets or less, could face a funding problem in coming years as the Fed goes about shrinking its massive balance sheet. According to the 19-page report, the New York-based bank has begun sharing with some clients. Really? You don't say. The Fed, as we conspiracy theorists said immediately, what this will lead to is actually now, years and years and years and years later, by one of the most prominent banks in America, by assets, JPMorgan, is now saying the Fed's decision to prop up the economy. That's what they're saying. How the Fed propped up the economy. They're using the word propped up. I thought it was recovery, quantitative easing to help the recovery, smooth it out. Not prop it up. Prop it up is what we called it. You're propping up this false narrative. The false narrative you're giving us. We know what it is. It's propping up the economy falsely. You're flooding it with cheap money, quantitative easing, buying back bonds, buying back mortgage-backed securities, buying all this crap. Now your balance sheet has $4.5 trillion. And I think they're about to explain why this little deposit issue is about to happen. The Fed's bond buying spree from 2009 to 2014. Remember, at one point they were spending $80 billion every single month, and that lasted 2 to 3 years, I think. Every month. And then there's another $20 billion for something else, I forget what else, that they added to. It was like, okay, wow, it's now turned to $100 billion. Oh my God. So the Fed's bond buying spree, which lasted from 2009 to 2014, that you and I know as quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2, and quantitative easing 3. Here's a lovely keyword. Inadvertently left the industry flush with deposits. Investors took money they got selling mortgage-backed bonds and treasury securities to the Fed and parked it in U.S. retail and commercial bank accounts. This created approximately $2.5 trillion in extra or excess bank deposits. This is all according to JPMorgan, of course. It estimates that somewhere around 60 or so percent, which would be around $1.5 trillion, of that money will trickle out of banks in the next 4 to 5 years if the Fed follows through with recent guidance, as they talked about, and actually begins reversing quantitative easing in December, which, as they said, that is, we're going to unwind. We need to unwind our balance sheet. We need to unwind it. Keeping in mind, Ben Bernanke, when he first asked for all this money, had a chart that showed by, I keep forgetting if it was January 2015 or January 2016, but one way or the other, that this massive balance sheet they had would be back down to normal at about $500 billion, about $500 billion, which is normal for their balance sheet. Not $4.5 trillion, half of $1 trillion. And they're still sitting on $4.5 trillion. And I've been saying this recently. How the hell are they actually going to unwind this thing? Who's going to be buying this back? Like, where's it going to come? Who's going to buy all that trash, toxic assets they bought in the first place? But again, I think it's about to explain it. The Fed is currently holding around $4.5 trillion of these securities. The way it will get rid of them is by letting them mature and not buying new ones. Okay. JPMorgan's presentation, which they titled Core Deposit Strike Back, illustrates how this process will sap bank deposits using the example of a couple who pays off a mortgage that was bundled with other mortgages and sold to the Fed. Remember that? Mortgage-backed security. They bundled them all together and sold them off to Wall Street. They collapsed. Fed stepped in. We'll take them and give you 100 cents on the dollar for that garbage. That's what we're talking about. So in this example, a couple who pays off a mortgage, right, free and clear, that mortgage happened to be bundled with other mortgages and was sold to the Fed. Right now, when that couple takes that money out of their bank account for that payment, to pay it off, get rid of the mortgage, the Fed uses that cash to buy another mortgage bond, recycling it back into the banking system. A deposit is essentially destroyed if the Fed does not do this reinvestment. JPMorgan estimates that a quantitative easing related deposit drain could result in loan growth lagging deposit growth by, get this, $200 billion to $300 billion per year. Okay? Loan growth lagging deposit growth. $200 billion to $300 billion a year. Wow. That could be particularly problematic for banks that rely on deposit products that tend to roll over swiftly, such as brokered accounts bought from third parties, large commercial banking accounts, and high-interest saving accounts for wealthy customers. It may also set off a dash for retail deposits, a classification that includes bread and butter checking accounts, which banks love because they are especially cheap and stable. Mid-sized banks will have an especially hard time growing retail deposits by ramping up advertising and investing in branches, according to JPMorgan's presentation. That's because they lack the marketing muscle of mega banks such as JPMorgan itself, as well as Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and Bank of America Corp. JPMorgan, like some other banks, offers depositors cash incentives for opening new checking and savings accounts with five-figure balances. About 42% or $1.6 trillion of the new deposits that U.S. banks have amassed since late 2009 have gone to lenders with at least $1 trillion in assets. Large banks are making sizable investments in brand, customer acquisition, and technology, leading to market share gains. Since big banks have the wherewithal to hold on to those gains, smaller ones may have to consider selling or buying rivals to bulk up on retail deposits, JPMorgan has said. The need for retail deposits to fund loan growth, the challenge of organically originating new relationships on the scale required to support technology and brand investments will drive consolidation, the report states. A looming push for retail customers may already be spurring deal-making, JPMorgan says, noting that a handful of bank mergers have involved targets with heavy concentrations of deposits purchased from brokers or acquired through listing services such as Quick Rate, both of which are more expensive funding sources than retail accounts. The median for deposits in the form of brokered and listing service accounts for U.S. banks with at least $1 billion in assets was 2.5% at the end of 2016. Those types of funds accounted for more than 20% of deposits at BNC Corp, Bancorp, and Private Bancorp, according to regulatory filings. Deposit needs factored into both banks' decisions to seek a partner. Selling to Pinnacle is an excellent opportunity to really drive some really serious dynamic deposit growth to fund this machine over the next several years. Private Bancorp urged investors to vote in favor of its deal with CIBC in a shareholder presentation last month to help address standalone funding constraints by giving it access to a large retail deposit base. Selling to CIBC will help Private Bancorp when interest rates rise, Terry McEvoy, a Stephens Inc. bank analyst, said Monday in a research note to clients. We have long felt the company needed to improve their funding base to support loan growth. He said, to do so on a standalone basis would be expensive and difficult. Proxy firm Institutional Shareholder Services, Inc. has advised Private Bancorp stockholders to reject the deal because it undervalues the Chicago-based lender. A shareholder vote is scheduled for Friday. So they're already preparing, the big banks, to scoop up the medium banks. And they want the medium banks to merge with each other and or purchase smaller banks that have great deposits in them for this quote-unquote unwinding that the Fed is going to do. And if JPMorgan, the club, also known as the government, tells you this is our presentation, you could probably be rest assured that that's going to happen, which also means quantitative easing, as we said, was a problem that was going to cause some major problems. It was a problem to start with, but it was going to cause major problems later, additional problems. And here we are. And they're saying by later this year, potentially, we could start to see those problems. And it's all because the Federal Reserve now has to unwind its $4.5 trillion balance sheet. And JPMorgan is warning everybody should start trying to merge now. And this company over this other one, Private Bancorp, we're ready for this deal. Let's shareholders give us the green light. And the other one, proxy firm, Institutional Shareholder Services, Inc., has advised Private Bancorp stockholders to reject the deal because it undervalues the Chicago-based lender. It ain't enough. Well, this is the banks, and the banks love to get a fire sale. They love to buy stuff when there's blood on the streets, right? So don't be surprised if they try to make an offer that's not good for them, for the company that they're trying to get, and its shareholders. It'll be great for their shareholders, but not for the company's shareholders, because we're going to offer you crap for your company. And they may take Institutional Shareholder Services, Inc.'s advice and say, no, that's too much. That's not enough. We're not going to do that. And then later this year will come, and they'll be begging them. Listen, that deal you gave us earlier, we denied. Can we relook at that? Is that quote still good? No, it only lasts 60 days. We're going to have to write up a new one. On the new one, got to be honest, it's going to be bad. It's going to be real bad. It's going to be for pennies. It's going to be for a fraction of what we offered you before. When the club gives you an offer, even though it's not the greatest, you got to take the offer. Because later on, the club will get what they want. And when they have to wait later, now you're going to pay. And they're going to get it for a sweetheart deal. JPMorgan is letting everybody know they expect interest rates to rise. They expect the Fed actually does unwind its balance sheet, and that we need to start merging now, one way or the other. So, on that note, it looks like the collapse is on. Federal Reserve is going to do what it said it's been doing, even though the real data we study says, no, you should not be raising rates. No, you should not be even talking like that. You should be lowering them back down, even though that was a horrible decision, but going up is even worse. But they said they're going to do it anyways. As long as the market and the economy, the market looks like the way we are now, we don't see a reason why we will back off of that. Which means what? This guy, Sandy Adeja, whatever his name is, Adeja, or Jadea, May 11th, which today's the 9th. You're going to see this 9th. 10, 11, 2 more days. What's happening? Maybe a fizzle, maybe a nothing. And we may get all the way to the special date, which date? September 23rd. And then things start to unwind. Because again, that's the date that matters. Remember, they got this $1.1 trillion funding bill to get the government through to September. Wait a minute, we're already at $20 trillion. We have the world's largest economy, don't we? We have this massive GDP every year. Why do we need to borrow an additional $1.1 trillion to get us to the end of the year? Why is that needed? We have this huge GDP. Because we're going to get to the end of the year, we're going to have $21 trillion in debt. And then 21, they're going to say, now what do? We need to go crazy. Give them a $5 trillion can-kicking session, who knows what. Or maybe the government will actually shut down. Maybe that was part of the plan the whole time. And we have to liquidate everything, treasuries, everything that we have. Of course, the world's going to be liquidating those too if that happens. I guess we can't really liquidate our own treasuries. They're certainly not going to buy them. We'll just have the Fed step in and buy them. But we may have to do a little devalue. A little devaluation may have to happen, to deal with the debt problem. I just don't see how Congress is going to give Trump now because you know how much they hate them. A huge, massive spending bill. Kick that can way down unless North Korea misbehaves. But then again, if North Korea misbehaves right now, sinks one of our carriers, it doesn't really matter. He's already got the 1.1 trillion to get to the end of the year, and we'll be okay. Of course, he may instantly come back, guys. We need an emergency spending bill for defense, like a lot more, because of this issue, which makes the 1.2 maybe 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 trillion. Who knows? But the banks are saying, again, the bank of all banks, JPMorgan, there's going to be big bank, take little bank, because we're all in need of major deposits. And we want you medium banks to do that now so that later on we can scoop you up. You're going to consolidate amongst yourselves and then consolidate the smaller banks. And by the time we're ready for you, we'll gobble you guys up. And as Lindsey Williams said years ago, as he said by his elite friend, there will be around somewhere between 6 and 9 major banks. You know who, which banks, he said, the too big to fail. That'll be your only choice. 6 to 9 of them, that's your choice. There's no small, nothing. That'll be your only choice. That was the plan years ago, he said. And here we have JPMorgan essentially saying that. We need to gobble up medium banks, and the medium banks are going to gobble up the smaller ones first for us. So that when we gobble up them, well, we own them all. And it still may have the same name. It may not say JPMorgan Chase. They may leave the names the same, except the owner is the new owner, owned by the group that owns JPMorgan or whatever. That's all. Chase owns it all. It just says, so-and-so credit union or so-and-so mom and pop bank of, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It's owned by them. But naturally, you would think, once they gobble up those banks, no, we're going to go ahead and change the name. Because we want the whole country to see our name, our branch, JPMorgan. Hey, it's us. Because the sheeple in this country are too stupid to do what the people in Iceland did. Goldman Sachs came in and brokered some kind of deal to become part ownership of a little bank branch or something over there. And the people in Iceland, I talked about this, immediately responded, pull our deposits out of this bank immediately and put them over here in this small bank or whatever, this mom and pop bank, what do you want to call it? They did it immediately. Oh, Goldman Sachs is involved? Nope, take our money out. We don't want that. Thank you. In America, we don't have a clue. Doesn't matter. This bank, that bank, whatever. Don't care. JPMorgan scooped up this bank. Don't care. It's fine. Well, I guess we get what we deserve, huh? Remains to be seen what happens later this year, but I've said it before, and I think I'm going to have to say it again. I think this September, October timeframe, just later this year, maybe the starting of the event that rolls into 2018, becomes horrible, currency crisis, we need a new world currency, feel the pain for the rest of the year, okay, we've come to an agreement. Meanwhile, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, gold and silver are blowing up to highs never before thought of. Well, unless you read the Webbot report. Take care.